You may have heard the saying, knife makers don't make mistakes, they just make smaller knives. Well, a few weeks ago, I made one of my first ever knives, and I actually really liked the design, but I decided to add some jimping, and when I did that, for some reason I thought I could freehand it, and I really felt like I screwed it up. I made a video of that project, and if you want to watch that, there'll be a video up here, but what I'm going to do today is pretty much destroy all my hard work. I thought I could live with the jimping issue, but I really couldn't. And I liked the knife. I liked it enough that I wanted to keep it, but I knew I was going to have to make some pretty dramatic changes to the profile of the knife. So I made the decision that I would take this knife and turn it from a, camping, bushcraft, general purpose type of knife into something, you might call it a fighting knife or a boot knife or something like that. I decided to take the tip from a drop point down to a pretty dramatic clip point. And I knew that I'd be removing a lot of material from the blade end of the knife, and so to keep the balance reasonable, I wanted to remove some from the back, which actually worked out because I think this winds up being, again, almost like a boot knife or a more concealable type of knife once I'd shortened the handle. Now, I'm still pretty limited in the tools that I have, but I do have an angle grinder, and I've used it for a lot of different things. In fact, if you're thinking about getting into knife making, that's one of the first things I would buy in terms of power tools. So it's a 4.5-inch grinder. That obviously didn't give me the radius that I needed to really carve out the clip point shape that I wanted. But you'll see here that I was able to kind of work back and forth and stop occasionally to take a look and make sure that I was doing things evenly, which actually worked out because each time I stopped, that gave everything a little bit of a rest, and the blade stayed a little cooler that way too. So once I had that roughed out with the angle grinder, I took it out, had a look at it, and brought it over to the belt grinder to finish it up. And really the key to this part of the process was to take it slowly, be mindful of the existing shape of the knife and the features that I wanted to keep. And just go a little bit at a time. Take out the grind marks, smooth things out a little bit, polish that blade back up. And basically just sort of clean up and reinforce the design work that I had already done with the angle grinder. And again, dip it in water a whole bunch to keep the blade cool, because at this point I do not want to ruin the temper on that blade. Then I put on a wood sanding belt. I think this is 120, might be 80 grit, but I used that to clean up the handle. And I made sure to keep that cool too, because the epoxy I used, I'm not sure what the limitations are on the heat that it can withstand. And of course the steel will heat up really fast on a grinding belt like this. So once I had the handle ground pretty much to the shape that I wanted, I brought it inside and used some sandpaper. Once I had it sanded smooth, I took out a blue wood stain and applied it to the knife. And I decided I wanted to go for kind of a distressed look, like this was going to be something you might see riding in a cowboy boot in an old movie. I didn't get any footage of it, but after I stained it, I came back in with some sandpaper and lightly went over the handle to give it kind of a distressed look. And then I applied some boiled linseed oil to it, brought it back out to the shop and ran it past the buffing wheel a couple times, and the knife was done. Now honestly, there's a little bit more work to do here. I might want to go in with a finer grit and clean up the blade a little bit. But for the most part, I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. For a knife that began life as a lawnmower blade and was subjected to really an awful lot of abuse, including more than one very extensive revision, I think it turned out pretty well. Now, that first knife I made was, at least in my opinion, was a pretty good looking knife too. But once I screwed up on that jimping, I couldn't think of anything to do to fix it until I remembered, knife makers don't make mistakes, they just make smaller knives. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day. We'll see you in the next video.